Thank you everyone for coming. For those who don't know me, my name is Cecil Renish-Smith. I'm Vice Chair of the Town Democratic Committee. We're very happy to see so many people here to come meet some of our Democratic candidates for statewide office, local representatives, lieutenant governor, state auditor. We had hoped Ellie Richards, who is running for governor, would be here, but she seems to be running late. Hopefully she will come while we're still here. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time listening to me blathering because I have nothing interesting to say. But I would like to introduce the candidates. We have Tim Ash, who is running for state auditor. We have Molly Gray, who is running for lieutenant governor. We have Esther Charleston, who is running for lieutenant governor. Jeff Palin, who is running for state representative for Rutland District 9, which is basically Brandon, Forestdale, and Genevie Ducheno, who is running for state representative for Rutland District 8, which is Pittsford Proctor. So Ellie Richards, who is running for governor. So the way we're going to do this is each candidate is going to have the opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about what they're running for, why they're running, their priorities.
Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here afternoon. My name is Ellie Richards, and I'm running for governor of this great state. And it was so great coming through the mountainsides from down from Montpelier and passed by Camp Thorpe, which I realized great memories from in high school. I was a counselor there for a couple of years, and when they hosted Camp Daybreak, actually, and my principal assistant Rhea, we were realizing on the way down, was a baby in Brandon, which is the cutest thing I've ever heard in my life. She lived here as a baby for a couple of years. So, look, here's the situation. I grew up in Newbury, Vermont, in a small dirt road with Molly Gray, and I grew up there because my parents thought this is the best place in the world to raise a family. And you know what? They were right. But as I began my professional career as an organizer, I realized that Vermont that I grew up in is really no longer accessible. And so I rolled up my sleeves and led a coalition of 40,000 people from all walks of life in the state of Vermont, 6% of our population, to tackle a root cause of our affordability crisis, which is childcare. And that's when Phil Scott tried to stop us, because we passed the most significant childcare bill in the country, and he vetoed it. But it didn't work, because we overrode his veto with all the Dems, all the progs, a bunch of Republicans, a bunch of independents, and the sole libertarian in that state. Okay, that's a real Vermont conversation. And I think that's why this bill is working as well as it is, saving thousands of families and childcare tuition assistance so they can actually afford to live here, creating hundreds of new childcare businesses, allowing businesses to have employees because they can be in childcare. So what I realized was after a decade of working to solve this crisis with Vermonters, that affordability crisis we're talking about has only gotten worse by every other measure: housing, healthcare, education. So look, we really rolled up our sleeves and took a big swing at early child education in Vermont, a big, thorny, systemic problem. Just imagine what we can do when we're actually in charge, because we did that as a community. And when you are the governor, you should have some ideas. You should be able to get some stuff done. You know, we've had a governor for 10 years who's been a goalie, and we need a strategic offense. Okay, when you're blaming, you're not leading. And he has diagnosed the problems perfectly, and he has blamed everything that's wrong on the legislature. And that's a setup. So my hope is to be in community with all of you as a strategic offense, doing the work, having the plan, a Vermont Economic Action Plan. We haven't had a state economic development plan in over a decade. We need one. We need one. We need to know, how are we getting housing, healthcare? How do these things intersect with each other? And what do we get when we take the big swings and get them done? So I have a lot of exciting things I want to talk to you all about. I'm excited for the speed dating. I'll speak this one idea. We need to be able to take the big swings and know that they're going to work. And here's at the basis of all my platform, housing, healthcare, is workforce. Okay. And so this week I'm about to roll out my plan for free community college for all. It's really not expensive. We have the money for it. It's the last dollar. We've already made lots of investments, but we have the lowest amount of kids going on to anything after they graduate high school. And we have these huge workforce gaps. And then we're losing kids. You know, I don't want to tell you how many of my classmates we've lost to overdose, to suicide. So folks are not engaged. They're not going on past high school. And we don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough plumbers. We don't have enough mechanics. We don't have enough skilled nurses. Right? So when you say something like free community college for all, it changes people's minds about whether they can be engaged in the system. So as you can tell, I'm a racehorse. I've been around the track a couple of times. I really know what it takes. And I'm excited to do this with y'all. And I have identical twin boys. They're 7.5 years old. And they're running this campaign with me. And they're my little fosters. So Bo, one of my twins, let's still discuss a little. And I said, well, it's a true flag because he's a race car driver. And he said, well, that's funny. I would have figured it would be a flat tire because he's not bringing us anywhere. So 7.5-year-old, he's hired. Thank you all for being here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon and fighting for the community, for democracy, and
Everyone, Tim Ash. I'm running for state auditor. When you're running for state auditor, you can't quite give the inspirational speeches. I'll try and know my lane here. Just a brief bit of background and then a little bit about what animates my run for the state auditor's office. For the last 5 years, I've served as Vermont's deputy state auditor. I was appointed by Doug Hoffer in 2021. It's not seeking reelection, and I decided to step up, and I'll explain why. In my past life, I was an affordable housing developer for Cathedral Square. For those of you who know Cathedral Square, it's the largest nonprofit developer of housing for lower income older Vermonters and Vermonters with disabilities. I developed hundreds of units of housing. I've been the chair of the Community Health Centers Board. Community Health Center, some of you, if you're familiar in Burlington with Riverside Ave, it's the big primary care organization there. It's the largest in the state of Vermont. We employ 350 people, so I have a pretty in-depth view of the healthcare landscape. Before all that, my first job out of college actually was working for Bernie in his Vermont office, so I came to communities like Brandon all the time. I was always stuck in the car with them, and I'll just briefly tell you. So, I don't know why I want to go down this memory, but so, you know, it was 1999. Cell phones weren't really a thing. Why am I telling this story? Okay, you'll be the judge after I tell it. So it's 1999, and we didn't really have cell phones or anything. So I was, fresh out of UVM. I'd be out with my friends on a Friday night. I'd come in at like 1 a.m, and the little light would be flashing on my voicemail thing, like the old little flashing light. And I would hit play, and I won't do my Bernie impersonation, but he'd say, Bernie, he'd say, Tim, it's 8 o'clock. If I don't hear from you by 9, I'll assume you can meet me at the top of Church Street at 6 tomorrow morning. We're going to Bennington. That was like, I would always start. But anyways, as I said, why did I tell you that story? Why I'm running for auditor is really pretty basic, which is it is not a surprise to people that people's confidence in the ability of government to tackle big problems is really at a low point. That's not just concern about the federal government. I feel like that's a concern people have both at the state and local level. I have, throughout my public service career, which includes being in the Senate and in municipal life, have been a stickler, not just for the big visionary policies, but wanting to make sure things will actually work. I believe that those of us who believe in the importance of the public sector tackling problems we can't tackle on our own often find ourselves making excuses when things don't go well. And I think we have to get out of the excuse-making business. And when we find that government has fallen short, we're honest about it, and then we go about trying to fix it and get things back on track. 4 quick priorities for me: lowering healthcare costs. It is, to me, quite shocking that in the last 5 years, Vermont's health insurance premiums went from about the national average to double the national average, something people should talk more about. It's very concerning. Housing, my interest and experience in affordable housing in particular, we have dozens of housing programs in the state. It is not at all clear we know which ones are truly delivering the most affordable housing at the best value. And I'll just tell you one thing that really concerns me. In 5 years, Vermont Public Radio estimated that Vermont spent $780 million to create 4,400 units of housing. At the exact same time, Vermont lost 5,000 units that were converted to short-term rentals. So think about that. $780 million later, we were worse off from a housing pressure point of view. Priority 3, trying to inoculate the state budget from the actions of President Trump in Congress, trying to identify those risks, both spending-wise and programmatic. And then 4th, the rural economy. I've long been interested and have done some consulting work with small towns. I feel like the message from Montpelier to small communities has been very mixed. The future of small schools, small hospitals, public health, community health, all of those things. I don't think you can look to Montpelier and feel like you've gotten a clear sense of whether they believe we should be investing in small towns or disinvesting. From my point of view, we need thriving small towns and want to use the tools of the auditor's office to see what's actually working, what's not, so we can move very smoothly. I've got better odds than my Bernie story. So I'll close on a Bernie story. My first day in Bernie's office was literally 3 days after I graduated from UVM. I didn't really know what to expect. I was going to be the front desk guy, the one taking all the phone calls, answering the mail, doing all the grunt work. And Bernie walks in, and I'm thinking he's going to astound me with some visionary comment about, global trade policy or something. And instead, what he said was, "Now, Tim, you're answering the phones." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "No one who calls this office is going to hear the phone ring a third time. You're going to pick up the phone by the second ring every single time someone calls here because people are tired of talking to machines and not being treated like people." And I always thought, what a first lesson from Bernie Sanders. But it really has animated my view of how public servants and government should view people like people and treat them as such, and that customer service has to be, I think, reinvigorated. We have to treat people like they matter, like they're the most important person who's going to call that day. So when I think about the auditor's office, that lesson from way back 27 years ago sticks with me. So thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be in a nice, cool basement on a warm and sunny Vermont afternoon. I just want to welcome and say hello to all of our candidates here. And I think it's the first time actually many of us have been together and have gotten to hear each other. I'm already so fired up and inspired by Allie and Tim. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about why I'm doing this and what I've been up to for the last 3 years and why I feel so strongly and know so very well that the Lieutenant Governor's office isn't a ceremonial one, and we deserve so much more than we're getting right now. For those of you I don't know, it's a weird Vermont thing. I always feel like I have to point. It's a little hard when we're in a basement, but I still think Newberry is that way. I grew up in South Newberry, not too far from Allie. I'm a deeply proud product of Vermont's education system. I grew up on a vegetable and dairy in a 1790s farmhouse that I like to share with folks, still today doesn't have a dryer, dishwasher, and microwave. And sometimes I think my folks were the OG environmentalists, if you will. And proud graduate of the University of Vermont and Vermont Law School. And for the last 20 years, I worked as a human rights advocate and lawyer, as an assistant attorney general, Vermont assistant attorney general, as Vermont's former lieutenant governor. But what I want to talk about is what I've been up to. And since my term ended in 2023, there's been some pretty phenomenal and incredible changes for the absolute best. I'm now a mom to a soon-to-be 3-year-old, Jack, whose birthday is on Wednesday. And whatever I thought I knew about being a working parent, as anyone does, you quickly learn you don't know. He's been the greatest gift, but I can tell you, really having a better understanding of the deep, deep economic pressures facing families who are trying to care for kids, trying to afford childcare, trying to afford diapers, which luckily he's out of by now, in formula, but also trying to navigate caring, in my case, for a mom who has multiple sclerosis, and trying to navigate that feeling of being the generation that is so committed to being in Vermont, despite it being really, really hard. I've also had the chance for the last 3 years to work for an organization called the Vermont Afghan Alliance. And we started as a scrappy GoFundMe funded driving program with a Toyota Corolla to help the first Afghan arrivals coming to Vermont after the U.S. withdrawal in 2021. And many of you may not know this, but now Vermont is home to 650 plus, probably close to 700 by now, Afghan allies who served as interpreters, judges, lawyers for our government. And that is the largest population in the nation per capita. And from Rutland to Montpelier to St. Albans, Bennington, Brattleboro, Springfield, Hartford. And even on the hardest possible days, and I'm going to talk about those in a second, of the last few years, I've had so much hope because of individuals who are here every day, filling jobs, finding housing, even though it's extremely, extremely challenging, and giving us, our state, everything they've got. And I've been proud to be part of growing our workforce and our tax base, but also seeing some pretty big challenges up close. But I want to talk about what I've also seen up close, and that is the extreme and deep cruelty of the Trump administration. For I thought they would never come for the Afghans, right? I mean, the betrayal is beyond anything we can possibly imagine. But I will never forget last year at this time when an Afghan man, a truck driver, was detained by ICE and put in Vermont Department of Corrections custody because we have a contract, and went without access to an interpreter or legal counsel for over a week. And then fast forward to August of last year when Vermont, our governor, handed over SNAP data. And then in October of last year, when we became the first state in the nation to end SNAP for refugees, asylees, and immigrants. And then in February this year, when our current Vermont lieutenant governor cast the tie-breaking vote to send an acting Trump U.S. attorney who was willing to have a Vermont resident deported for exercising his free speech rights to our Vermont Supreme Court. And we are in the battle of our lives right now to not send our Vermont voter data to Washington. The next 3 years of this administration are going to be the absolute worst. We're already seeing that. And I don't believe we should ever be coordinating or capitulating. We can't afford to have a lieutenant governor who isn't going to help hold the line. And that's why I'm stepping up with the skills and experience I have as a former prosecutor, as a human rights lawyer, someone who's working across the state in community for the last 3 years, to make sure that we have the strongest possible armor in the governor's office, in the auditor's office, Charity Clark in the AG's office, our Mike Pichak in our treasurer's office, Sarah Copeland-Hansis in the Secretary of State's office, every day protecting us, protecting our rights. Because if democracy is not protected in Vermont, we're done for. We're the stake in the ground. And then 2, everything comes back to supporting working families and lowering costs. I hope today, as we break out, I can talk about my plan to support universal primary care. I don't think any amount of school consolidation is actually going to address healthcare costs. That's the biggest challenge ahead of us. There's lots of discussion already happening around what we can do around affordable housing. And I hope we'll get to talk about that too. But I really hope today you will ask all your questions and really dive in, but leave here today fired up, ready to get involved, because there can't be any observers in this election. For any of these races, for any of our races at every single level, it is upon all of us. And my biggest hope is that we in this state build the strongest possible coalition, erasing political parties to figure out the really, really tough stuff ahead for us, our resilience and our resistance, and we do that in a uniquely Vermont way. So thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk, and thanks for coming out today.
Good afternoon, all. I am Esther Charleston, and who am I? How did I get here? Well, I remember a few years ago being in a room where women were asked to be silent. Actually, the male ego was the center of the conversation. And I remember raising my hand and saying, hey, I have an ego too. Could you imagine what the room was like when I said that? Quiet. Everybody looked at me like, what are you doing here? That's when I knew I was in the wrong room. I then moved to Vermont, got a job at Middlebury College, and I remember during my interview thinking, wow, this is a beautiful place to raise children. And I was right. I moved here with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And shout out to my son, Lawrence. If I could, my mom taking me to another event again. And then I saw, wow, this is a great place. And I built community here. Then in 2021, I was elected to the Middlebury Select Board. And I was the only young mom and the only renter. And my presence there changed the conversation. That's when I knew, oh, it's important to step up. It's important to say something, and it's important to make a stand. And that began my journey. Not only there, but also in education, as I was in higher ed, then was a dean, then I became a small business owner here in Vermont, building it from scratch, and currently chair the Vermont Commission on Women. I see one of our commissioners here, Amanda, celebrating just us fighting for women's rights in the State House, empowering our executive director for the last 3 years. So where did I come from? I'm like, hey, I'm this Black woman moving to Vermont and just deciding to engage in community. Well, I came from my Haitian American immigrant parents, Anita and Glacian Charleston. They moved here, raised 5 children here. I'm the oldest, can you tell? And they instilled in us, hey, you get a job, you work hard, education, and build a life here for you and your children. My mom was the friend who, if someone was going through a divorce, guess whose house they were at? Our house. She would move us all out of a room and say, hey, you stay here with your friends. She was helping build wells in Haiti, not forgetting her community. She exudes love and service. That's who I'm from. The woman that said being a part of community is important and you don't have a choice. And it's important for you to stand up and show up. So that's what I did when I moved here to Vermont. So I've had the privilege these last few months traveling the state, really listening, engaging with people, learning about folks who are like, hey, all 3 of my children are on Dr. Dinosaur, which we celebrate. Yes, for Dr. Dinosaur. But guess what? The parents have what? No insurance. Why is that? Talking to families, one particular lady who said, hey, I've never voted. She's raised 2 kids here and she's in her 50s. Is she alone?
Yeah.
No. Folks are not feeling like their voice matters. And so what is my work? Being lieutenant governor, you do not bring new legislation. You preside over the Senate. You are on committees, making sure senators are on the right committees, being a part of that voice, and you have the power to convene. Now that's where my skills come in. So for the last few years, I am an educational consultant. I bring people together and we say the hard thing, the thing nobody wants to talk about, and then going past that and getting to a solution. As Lieutenant Governor, my mission would be to be a bridge, bridging communities to those in Montpelier, making sure folks have access, doing that through the lens of what everyday costs, the squeeze is real, education, as we're at crossroads right now, and folks are deciding consolidation, what does that look like, and do we force or not? Well, it's looking like we're not voluntary, but are we talking to each other? Are we learning from each other? And lastly, economic freedom. There are a lot of folks who cannot buy their first home. Anybody know somebody struggling to buy a house? Struggling to find a house? We need a Vermont where young families can buy their first home. We need a Vermont where people can age in place and sell their house if they've outgrown it and have a place to go. Mm-hmm. And we need a Vermont where folks are no longer homeless, that we're catering to all so we can all thrive here. So that is my vision and mission, to be a convener, to really everyday costs, education, and economic freedom, making sure that we are grounded in that. Because the Vermont I believe in is a free education. Yes, come on now. You know, New Mexico's done it. We can do it too. We're small enough where we can fix our own issues, where we can leave nobody behind. And it's about coming together. It's about working together and across our differences. And my intention is to get us there as a team. Thank you.
It's really cool. They gave me 4 tough acts to follow. My name's Jeff Palin. I'm running for state representative here in Rutland 9, which is Brandon and Forestdale, pretty much just the town of Brandon. There's a lot of reasons I'm running. One of them that I think about a lot is how every time I'm in a room like this, I'm the youngest person in it. There's been a couple times I haven't been. It's really exciting. I'll be 30 in October, and frankly, it is one of the biggest struggles we have right now is that among people my age, there just isn't anyone who, not through any fault of their own, is showing up. And they can't because they're working 2 jobs, trying to keep a roof over their heads, trying to feed their kids, trying to make sure they're getting through to the next day. I am very fortunate to be in a position where I have a little bit of free time and I can do this. But that is a luxury that is not shared by kind of anyone my age. I know folks who make low 6-figure jobs and they can't afford houses, let alone people who are making at the medium income, which is about half that. And that's in Vermont and that's in everywhere. My career in public service started right out of college. My first job was working for a completely unknown Texas candidate for state representative. You may know him now. His name is James Tallarico. But back then he was a complete nobody. And he was about my age when he was running for his first state representative seat. And he showed me that the way to be an effective politician and the way to be an effective candidate is to be a servant leader. Someone who leads through service, not leads above service. Taking his example forward, I have found every opportunity I possibly can in my adult life to help those around me, serve my community, build my community. I run events here in town for free because it's fun and because I want to do it. If anyone has ever needed to borrow a truck, if anyone has ever needed to move a shelf, do a little bit of woodworking, I am usually just a phone call away, even though sometimes it takes me a couple weeks longer than I would like it to. A few years ago, I had what's called an AVM, an arteriovenous malformation, which is it's not a tumor. It functions kind of like a tumor. It was in my occipital lobe right here. Essentially, it's a birth defect. It had nothing to do with anything I had ever done. And I have a health insurance that I pay a lot of money for, and that surgery, which I would have died without, to be clear, cost me $20,000. Without insurance, it would have cost me $500,000. And again, I'm in an extraordinarily fortunate position that $20,000, while it messed me up, did not ruin my life. And there's a lot of folks for whom that is simply a bridge too far. That's not a recoverable amount of money for a lot of people. And so I have firsthand experience seeing how just awful it is to be, in the midst of a serious healthcare issue. And I was a healthy 26-year-old at the time, let alone, and I didn't have kids, and I, wasn't worried about anyone else besides myself. And so when you're a working parent or you're dealing with your parents who are aging and have medical needs, any of these problems that are just really not accessible to most people. I just want to make sure that those people have a voice in the legislature, that they are represented in the legislature. Here in Brandon, our current representative has, let's just say, has an interesting way of showing up, which is to say he has missed many votes in many committee meetings. If elected, I can assure you, if nothing else, I would be in the room. I would be there to make sure that you know what's going on in Montpelier and make sure that what's happening in Montpelier is communicated back to you effectively and regularly. I can echo all of the many salient points made by my friends and fellow candidates up here. But I believe in a Vermont where everyone can exist, everyone can be healthy, everyone can have a good life if they're willing to work hard for it. And I think that is a pretty reasonable take, and it shouldn't be at all controversial, but that is where we are right now. So thank you again for coming. I'm looking forward to chatting with you, and hope to see you soon.
Hi. hard to follow all these wonderful candidates. I'm Genevie Ducheno, and I'm running for Rutland 8, which is Pittsburgh and Proctor. And I think Jeff kind of put the reasoning why I want to run in a very similar way. I don't find that our current representative represents the people in an honest way or is in the room as much as they should be. I've had plenty of jobs in the corporate world, and if I said I don't work Mondays, then I wouldn't be getting paid. And I think we should have candidates who want to listen to the people and show up when they're supposed to. I've seen a lot of divisive rhetoric that I find disgusting, and I want to be somebody in the room saying we need to be decent human beings to each other. We are all on this planet together. We need to find things that make sure our kids have a future, our family members have coming generations. Because if we continue down the current road, we won't. If we get rid of small schools, there won't be towns to come back to. The kids will move away, they'll find a big city, and they'll never come back here. As much as Vermont has a million beautiful things, you have to build memories as a child if you want a reason to come back. So we need to stop consolidations. We need to use examples for things like Medicare for all or single payer healthcare. We need to make sure that we have communities that build for a future and not just to stem the bleed today. I want to be somebody that can help make that change. So that's why I'm running.